All right, y'all, we are rolling. And for those of you that don't know, my name is Lindsay Cantu. I'm Dr. Lindsay Matthews Cantu. I am the creator and founder of BirthFit. And I started BirthFit way back in 2013, back in my infancy of being a chiropractor, being a birth doula, and a strength and conditioning coach. At that time, I was living in Los Angeles and I was, halfway gym owner of a gym out there. It's still there in Venice, Deuce Gym, still there. It's a great gym. And yeah, I just saw a huge gap, and we're going to get into that. Before we go on, like I said earlier, throw any questions you have in the chat box. I will get to them at the end. And yeah, I'm going to get rolling so I make sure we have plenty of time for discussion. And as I say in all of our live events, our calls, there's no information that is TMI, nothing off limits. I will
You
always
didn't
share,
respond to me if they went back to sleep.
I will always share my experience, my lived experience, and my opinions, and my from my point of view. And yeah, then you can take what you want, take the medicine from here, and make your own choices. All right, so let's get rolling. All right, so one of my favorite phrases, and I'll say this, I'll say phrases a lot throughout this, but we keep it simple. We excel at the basics. And whenever I started BirthFit, like one of the things that started the journey for me was like inquiring about how we breathe as humans, like on the most basic fundamental level, how we move as humans, how we birth as humans on the most basic physiological level, meaning God's blueprint, how we were designed to move, how we were designed to breathe, how we were designed to birth. And, we've definitely convoluted that a lot. We've definitely muddied the waters a little bit. And that's what I want to bring it back to so that we can optimize our biology. And in turn, by optimizing our biology, we have a smoother conception experience, a smoother pregnancy, a more straightforward, smoother birth experience, and an absolutely smoother, like it doesn't have to be, it's going to be challenging, but it doesn't have to be brutal postpartum experience that you hear about every day here in the US. So we coach women within the motherhood transition. That is our niche. That is our avatar. That is our clientele. A business coach may say, don't limit yourself to this window, but I absolutely did because I feel like it was absolutely necessary. And I see more and more coaches, chiropractors, PTs joining our courses that want to focus on this because it's absolutely needed. And there's such a need for local, hands-on, in real life support more than ever. We focus on 7 foundational pillars: sun, sleep, nutrition, fitness, mindset, community, and spirituality. And what I want you to think of is like those are like a pie, and each one of those has a slice. And you can like write those out. And then, at different times, I recommend like, okay, filling in or shading in the slice, each slice on, how fulfilled you are in that space. They're all not going to be optimized at the same time, right? Because we give a little in one area and take a little bit of energy from another space. That's totally fine. Um, I want to help you. I want to help the pregnant woman right there, the postpartum woman down the street to optimize and cultivate practices within each of these pillars so that she can create her own system, her own ritual, her own routine to have a baseline, to flow back and forth within, to have like those bumper plates at a bowling alley. And, when she feels off, then she comes back in. She's like, okay, that slice of the pie is a little low. Let's, give that some attention. So even if you take away nothing today, but those 7 pillars, take those away. All right. I mentioned earlier, I started BirthFit back in 2013. I was working with my chiropractic hat on. I was working with my strength and conditioning hat on, CrossFit coach hat. I was working as a birth doula. I saw such a gap. Even though I was in Los Angeles, where lots of natural movements take off, including, natural birth. And there were great birth centers there. In fact, I worked at two of them. I worked at a birth center on the west side of Los Angeles, right on the border of Venice Beach and Marina Del Rey. And this was owned by a nurse midwife. And then I worked at a birth center on the east side, which was in near Eagle Rock and that area. And this was owned by a CPM, a certified professional midwife. And so just those two experiences were completely different because I have a professional midwife and a nurse midwife. A nurse midwife, generally speaking, has a more medical lens, has a more medical approach, where a CPM has not done nurse training first. She has a more, I would say, out of the box thinking, alternative thinking. She was an acupuncturist actually first, so I learned quite a bit about acupuncture and the meridians, and I love acupuncture, side note. And I'm so grateful for both of those experiences and the births that I got to attend there. But as I said, I was wearing these three different hats, and there's such a disconnect. The biggest three things right here, this is what I saw. Women were training, they still are, women trained to numb out or disconnect. And for those of you that don't know, maybe you're not part of the CrossFit world or haven't been, but CrossFit also started in Santa Cruz, California. So there was a big influence of CrossFit. And, at that time, I was part gym owner of a CrossFit gym. And I did not love how women were just, it was super cool to see how we could, push ourselves, go red line, go hard in the paint, just embrace suffering a little more. But when we're in season training for birth, this is a brain body connection. So when we're disconnecting from ourselves, then how are we going to connect with body, connect with baby, connect with God, do the dance of birth if there's no brain body connection? It's hard. And I will say, I'll come back to that because this will probably be a question. All right. The other two reasons, women were only training in one plane of motion. So at that time, not only was CrossFit big, right? Because I was in that community, but also Soul Cycle, spinning, power yoga was taking off. Gosh, I forget that yoga studio. Wanderlust, that was huge in LA at the time. Biking, triathlons were big in Los Angeles. And so if you think about it, for somebody that is a avid soul cycler, or even just all they do is CrossFit, or all they do is triathlons, they're only living in this plane of motion. They're only living in the sagittal plane of motion. Sagittal plane of motion is great, but birth does not happen just in the sagittal plane of motion. Birth is a dance, and baby has to corkscrew their way down and out. So if we're only training in one plane of motion, we're neglecting basically a connection, lack of strength, lack of range of motion in other spaces. We don't have literally an earned range of motion in any of those other planes of motion. And then I saw that fitness was the scapegoat for a woman that maybe had a miscarriage or two or three, or births that did not go as desired. So you might have heard this saying like, oh, she was too fit to give birth. Her pelvic floor was too tight. Or she was too fit to conceive. Y'all, my friend Miranda, y'all might know her, Miranda Alcaraz or Miranda Oldroyd back in the day, CrossFit Miranda, like she has the least amount of body fat I've seen on anybody. And she's been able to conceive fine. So I knew I knew fitness should not be the scapegoat. What happens is doctors and midwives, both the same in this instance, they don't really have the experience, the tools, everything on like more tools, more things in their tool belt. And what they see is fitness is the only thing that they can remove or blame, rather than going deeper and saying, hey, Let's do a complete metabolic panel with a thyroid panel, maybe a full Monty iron panel. Let's do an HTMA. Let's check out your mineral status. Maybe have you been to the chiropractor? Have you checked your HRV, your heart rate variability? Have you tried acupuncture? None of that was, being discussed. And there, like y'all, there's always going to be exceptionally great doctors, exceptionally great midwives, but on the whole, fitness was the scapegoat for miscarriage. And then these doctors and midwives would take that away from the woman. And that was her love. That was how she got community. That's how she like relieved some stress. So I just was like, I intuitively it felt off. And then for blaming fitness as the reason why the birth did not go the way it did, y'all, 2 generations ago, populations were way more active than us. We are the most sedentary we've ever been. And they were doing squatting in the fields, swimming, doing all the things up till birth. It's a mindset thing, it's a nervous system thing. Many of these women that are too fit were the ones training to numb themselves out. So their body's in a chronic fight or flight. They have the inability to soften, which you must be able to soften in order to surrender to a power greater than you, so that you can welcome that force, welcome that God in and through your body, so that you can breathe baby down and out. So, all right. So I created BirthFit to be the bridge for fitness, birth, and wellness, with a desire to enhance the connection between brain and body, like full embodiment. Lifting weights right here can be a somatic practice. You don't need a sound bath. You don't need a guru or any of that. You just need to be intentional. And lifting weights can absolutely be a somatic practice, connecting brain and body. I wanted to train general physical preparedness in all planes of motion. I wanted to train all 3 energy pathways, the glycolytic, the phosphagen, the aerobic, and functional basic human movements and breath work. So I say we do the basics well. There was nothing out there about general physical fitness, basic breath, how we were designed to breathe as humans, none of it. And I wanted to apply that to birth. And then as a chiropractor with a nervous system focus, we have to respect the nervous system, because if we don't feel safe, we are not going to expand. And we only expand and grow at the mercies of our nervous system's range of motion. You might have heard of something called the fear, tension, pain cycle. This is by a Grantley Dick Reed in the childbirth world. And basically, if there's fear present, you're going to tense up. That's going to create more pain. And that's a vicious cycle. It's also why you've heard stories, and I'll share with you that my birth was not painful at all. I would not use the word pain. I would say maybe intense at some points. The biggest trip I've ever had, but pain would not be a word I would use. And I promise you, when fear shows up, there is more pain. We expand when we feel safe. All right. The other reason I wanted to create BirthFit was because I look around and I saw mothers that were mothering for convenience rather than optimizing child development. Motherhood absolutely requires fitness. So if we're talking about trying to conceive, strength training enhances DHEA, which is a precursor to all sex hormones. So strength training twice a week minimum. Prenatal training absolutely must balance your body front to back, side to side, focus on strength and range of motion, and it needs to feel nourishing and connected to your body. Like I want you to feel at home in your body. This is your temple. This is your temple that God gave you. And I want you to love on it. I want you to respect it. And for me, that means training. Like training is a sign, a form of respect for my body. Like I said earlier, birth is a dance. It is dynamic. Movement is life. That's why whenever I see women laying in the hospital bed, I'm just like, oh man, like that baby doesn't have the opportunity to move around because mom's not moving. Okay, postpartum rehab, absolutely necessary. Intentional grounding movements are necessary. There's no prescription, there's nothing for postpartum rehab in our country. You see someone with an ACL injury, they know exactly what they're doing after surgery, after 3 weeks. They know what PT is happening, they know what they're doing at 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, but none of that for birth, whether it be vaginal or cesarean. And I know this because I blew out my ACL 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And my rehab was much better than what I've seen in the birth world. We need to have a baseline level of fitness in order to be the most optimal mother for our children. These bumbo seats, these rockers, these plastic devices for convenience, babies are not to be lived in those. That will not optimize their development. And I see this because mothers are out of shape. I see moms at the park not playing with their kids. They're just sitting there. Okay, I get having a break, but walk with your kid, crawl with your kid, show your kid what a squat looks like. My little girl, who's almost 2, knows what a push-up is. She knows what a squat is. She knows how to run. She knows what a downward dog is. She knows how to sit and stretch her toes. She knows what the butterfly stretch is because she's seen her parents do this. All right. This is one of my favorite sayings, and it's absolutely necessary. Write this down. It's gold. We birth how we live. I will say that over and over again. I write that on my tombstone. Actually, I'll be cremated, but write that down somewhere. Our lifestyle habits and practices reflect our intentions and our desires, our values, our priorities, all of it. And it will absolutely reflect those in the motherhood transition. Therefore, pregnancy is a revealer and birth is the biggest mirror of our lifestyle choices up until that moment in time. And yes, that includes our movement and training practices. All right. So, what do we need for birth? According to a famous French OB, Dr. Michel Audant, he's amazing. I've had the opportunity to hear him speak once when I was in Los Angeles. He's written numerous books. Just go grab any of his books and he'll blow your mind. Written numerous papers, but he says we need 2 things. We need to feel safe and unobserved. And how do we know we are safe? Well, our nervous system picks up on the environment, on lights, on sounds, on people's energy, on different things, on smells. It does this, and then it starts to register inside of goes into our brain, and it registers, is this a threat or are we safe? And this whole subconscious zero awareness process is called neuroception. And by the time we are aware, like maybe we got a racing heart or we're breathing out of our mouth, that process has already signaled to our nervous system that there's a threat and a physiological response is occurring. A state shift is happening. And so if there's a threat, a registered threat, and a physiological response to follow that, right? So our body is prioritizing safety. It is not going to prioritize reproduction in that moment. Then it's going to shut down reproduction, whether it's trying to conceive or we're in labor land. So our body picks up on environmental cues through a process called neuroception. And our movement capacity depends on our nervous system. Our movement capacity inside of labor depends on our nervous system. So we practice every day, and I'll show you our template here in a little bit. And we start with a conversation with our body. We explore ranges of motion of our hips, of our shoulders. And in turn, this is also exploring the range of motion of our nervous system. The more we explore, the more we embrace curiosity, there's a greater variation. The more we train in different planes of motion, y'all, this variety, these patterns that we're introducing, these patterns that we're practicing, these poses that we're practicing, those are all being imprinted on our nervous system. So we're enhancing our nervous system. We're building trust with our body. And that is what is going to carry over into labor. You know, one of the greatest positions for labor to birth a baby is actually on hands and knees or in a tripod position. And these are both BIRTHFIT Basics movements. But if you don't have the strength to hold yourself up in your shoulders and your core, it's going to be very hard. Another position is like bringing your knee to your chest. If baby has a nuchal cord or maybe, or sorry, a shoulder dystocia, midwives know bring knee to chest. Well, if you're not comfortable in that and they put you in a movement or a pose that you're not comfortable in, that's gonna, your neuroception process is gonna pick up and be like, hold on, this is off. I haven't been imprinted with this motion yet. I don't feel safe here. And it's going, your body's always doing things for you. So it's going to prioritize safety. Even though that might be a beneficial movement, your body does not know that yet. All right. Before we move on, I want to touch on this. Is it safe? Is exercising safe in pregnancy? Cardio, lifting, swimming. What exercises are safe? What exercises are safe for my pelvic floor? Y'all, these are questions I get all the time. And I'm going to tell you, there is no such thing as safe. There are no safe exercises. There are no safe exercises for your pelvic floor. Safety is an illusion, right? And it starts with your nervous system. It starts with our own mind. So if there's a tagline in somebody's program that says this, for lack of a better words, they're full of shit. There is no way to remove all the risk associated with anything. I think there's a false sense of safety in the medical industrial complex when they provide ultrasound after ultrasound. Those are only a snapshot in a moment of time. And, half the time they haven't picked up on stuff or they give, false information. So there's no way to remove all risk, not even driving down the street, y'all. So get that out of your head. You have to decide what is safe for you and your family. And this is based on your own risk and benefit analysis that you look at your values, your desires, your intentions, and see if that choice based on the risk and benefits is in alignment with your family's values, intentions, or desires. So you have to do your own critical thinking with confidence. Be informed and be intuitively led, because birth requires courage and vulnerability. And like I mentioned in the previous slide, trust is built little by little, small acts of integrity. And when you start to show up for yourself in the gym or in the studio, you're showing yourself that you're worth it, that you respect yourself, that you respect your time, and you're honoring your movement practice. That is like on the most basic level, that is where you start with self-love, is by showing up for yourself for movement. And then that confidence carries over, that respect for yourself, that worthiness for yourself carries over into other parts of life. Movement is life, y'all. I said this earlier. We are the most sedentary we've ever been in human history. You may not be because you're here. And obviously, I feel like you respect movement and honor movement a little bit. But as a whole, our population is very sedentary. And, I do think this contributes to babies in I don't want to say less than ideal because I think positions are positions. But what I'm talking about is more breech babies or more posterior babies. Like the optimal position for a baby, according to midwives and OBs, is to have the baby like head down and their spine out. So like their spine going like this. A posterior baby, their spine is kind of up against you. A breech baby, their head is up. A transverse baby, they're lying like sideways. They're chilling. Most babies will go head down by the time of birth. Less than 5% of babies choose to be born breech. But if we're not moving in all planes of motion, if we're not offering up adequate range of motion and space for baby to move, they're only going to be able to move in the space that they've been given. Just think about that. We are weight bearing mammals, and this mainly pertains, excuse me, to postpartum because, I get women a lot that come to BirthFit that come to me and say, hey, I was diagnosed with a prolapse. I've been told I can't lift weights ever again. It's like, well, you're going to have to carry your baby, and probably your toddler. Like my toddler's 30 pounds. Um, you're probably going to need to carry a bag at some point, maybe some groceries. You're going to be weight bearing. You're a weight bearing mammal and you're going to need to be carrying load. To be a mother means to carry load. So we've got to figure out how to do that again. And this is why we set things up postpartum the way we did. Um, the other thing, I think this should be another bullet point, but being able to move freely not only supports your digestion, circulation, and other physiological functions, but it's, necessary for birth. Okay, so here's some general prenatal fitness recommendations. If this is all you take away, just screenshot it or you'll get the recording. Then do it. So if you are new to fitness or for everyone, this box on the left, move daily. Like see where you can incorporate more movement. Can you walk to the mailbox? Can you park the car farther away? Can you take the stairs instead of an elevator? Can you get 1 to 3 miles of walking in per day? And it doesn't have to be all at once. It can be 10 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes later on, 30 minutes at the end of the day. Like it can be cumulative. And then can you do 10 squats, just 10 squats a day? Start with that. And then you'll be surprised. You'll be like, okay, let me do 10 in the morning, 10 at lunch, 10 in the evening. Side note, if anybody is having trouble with gestational diabetes, moving after you eat is one of the biggest hacks, even if it's just 20 ankle raises or calf raises, whatever you want to call them. So clutch, or 10 squats. Okay, then we do 10 reps of the BirthFit Basics per day. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, just pick 3 movements and start with those. And then do 2 minutes to 20 minutes of nasal breathing breath work per day. And yes, we can absolutely get creative with that list and go deeper, but that is basic information. Okay, and then if you are a seasoned exerciser and you come to us, we start with that list on the left. We also get into something like, I call this like very mono training. So either it's swimming, hiking, or this is super simple. You don't have to have anything, like 10 to 20 minutes of lunges. And all you're doing, like put on a podcast and just do lunges. Put on a great album, just do lunges. And it's at a conversational pace. You can do walking lunges, you can do reverse lunges, you can do side lunges, whatever. But it's at like 60-70% effort. And then 2 times a week of general strength and conditioning. That's the minimum dose. The max dose we would say is 4 times a week. But within that, you're going to try to get somewhere between 2 times a week of medium to heavy load, medium to higher volume, and maybe 1 longer aerobic conditioning. And that lunges can count as that. All right, so here's our general postpartum fitness recommendation. Absolutely lying in, 30 days of lying in. And this doesn't mean just lie in your bed for 30 days. This means follow the BirthFit Lying In program, which is only $15. Um, and there we start with, okay, let's start getting morning sunshine and have one nursing session in the sun. Let's do some breathing. Let's do some abdominal massage. All those things are inside the Lying In program. And it has one video a day with supplement recommendations, nutrition recommendations. It's really a juicy PDF for only 15 bucks. But I say this because every culture around the world that um, has, I don't want to say happy moms, but there's little postpartum anxiety, little postpartum depression. Um, they have a really intentional recovery period, whether it's 30, 40 days of lying in. I had one woman in LA, she was Chinese, she did 60 days, and I forgot what they called that. There's a specific name, but her mom and her sister came over to take care of her, and her only job was to focus on bonding with baby. Everybody else did the chores around the house. Um, so that's super cool. Once you get past the lying in, then we start with the BIRTHFIT Basics. And again, we're focusing on breathing, we're focusing on basic movements, foundational movements, and nutrition. Nutrition, nourishing your body is huge. And that's super important for breastfeeding. Once you start, I always say the first load that we do is our baby, like holding our baby, wearing our baby. Baby wearing walks are a really good transition to see if your body can experience more load. And I would do those. I did the BIRTHFIT Basics every other day, and then I would do baby wearing walks. So the BIRTHFIT Basics actually took me 2 months instead of 1 month. But I love walking so much, and I love being in nature, and my daughter loves being outside. So that was really a really special time for us. Then once we get into the postpartum training program, this is all about functional movements, the squat, the hinge, the lunge, the push, the pull, carries from a neutral spine. No, life does not happen in a neutral spine, but that's where we prehab and rehab from. And then we start to use some progressive overload, tempo work, unilateral work. And then we get into dynamic stuff like running, jumping, Olympic lifting, if you will. And then always pelvic floor PT and chiropractic care. I think, some form of body work are absolutely necessary in that fourth trimester. Okay, here's some relative contraindications that you can check out on your own. And we are in season training for birth. I just shared this post on Instagram about the CrossFit athlete Lauren Fisher, because she was getting some hate about somebody was saying, how she's not promoting movement during her pregnancy. She's like, absolutely, I am. I'm just not training crazy, basically. We're in season training for birth. That means mind, body, and soul. You know, maybe muscle ups aren't the most appropriate movement in your third trimester for training for a specific goal. We don't modify the workout on the board or the regular routine at F45 or Orange Theory or whatever. We're literally training in all planes of motion, all energy pathways, our mindset for the birth we desire. We train using a neutral spine majority of the time. Like I said, this is a priority for prehab and rehab, and this is something I learned in my previous days as a sports chiropractor. But this is the best space to stack the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, and it offers so much range of motion for your diaphragm in that canister. So it absolutely must be prioritized when you're setting the foundation in pregnancy and then again postpartum. We train all energy systems, all planes of motion, and we train 5 of the 10 physical skills. So if you think about it, I think I have it listed. I'll wait a sec. Breath work, and y'all, birth is full of unknowns. So just like life, we got to be ready to adapt. All right, what do we need to train? We only need 3 things, if anything. Our bodies, a neutral spine, and bare feet. Bare feet on the earth is going to support grounding and all the nerve endings connecting with the negative ions of the earth, but also it's going to enhance proprioception and enhance stability and coordination. If you've ever wondered, like when I was creating BirthFit and, working in the more so in the CrossFit space, I really liked the article by CrossFit that Greg Glassman wrote titled, "What is Fitness?" I feel like nobody has answered that question as well as he has. And it's an amazing article. You can click on this link and it'll take you there. You'll have access to this. But in their definition of fitness, they describe it as work capacity across broad times and modal domains. They go on to say that fitness can be determined utilizing performance, or the Hopper model, physical skills, or a sickness wellness continuum, and energy systems. The fitness definition they created is different than the CrossFit definition. The CrossFit definition is constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity. So CrossFit is a means to gain fitness. It is not the definition of fitness, which I think people get wrong all the time. And like I said, there's no other fitness practice that has made a solid effort to define fitness or even define wellness. Our insurance companies don't even define wellness. It's hilarious. So I truly respect Greg Glassman and CrossFit for trailblazing in that chapter, in that space. And how would the CrossFit definition of fitness not be relevant for birth or motherhood? And not the definition of CrossFit, but the definition of fitness. So the definition of fitness, work capacity across broad times and modal domains, seems absolutely relevant to me for birth, because we don't know how long birth is going to be. It could be 3 hours. Like I just had a friend of mine, she gave birth to her third baby, ended up being a free birth accidentally because that baby came so fast, it was 1 hour. But first baby was 3 days. We don't know how long birth is going to be. Okay, and like I said, how do we prehab and rehab? Well, I really resonated with the Prague School of Rehab, and they teach developmental kinesiology. And this is truly where I found the origins of human breath and human movement. And this is developmental kinesiology and the milestones. This is what BirthFit Basics are based upon. You can find the BirthFit Basics for free on YouTube if you just want to go do them yourself. And I'll leave it there. But this, like the Prague School of Rehab and their approach to breathing and movement was so fundamental. I thought it was absolutely necessary to include. Okay, so our intention with BirthFit, right, is a means to gain fitness within a specific season of a woman's life. Preconception, pregnancy, and that fourth trimester. We functionally train in a way that develops competencies and skills, physical skills, and different planes of motion while enhancing the 3 metabolic pathways. We do this by utilizing movements that are innate, so natural movements. That is based on developmental kinesiology, right? These movements are universal, meaning the squat is a squat in both Texas and Japan. These movements are relatively safe, I should put relatively there, and comfortable when performed with integrity, or as in the CrossFit world, virtuosity. The movements, all of these movements originate from the core and then proceed to the extremities. And above all, functional movements are efficient, meaning we can move large loads, long distances quickly. And these translate into movements we see in life. All right, so here's the physical skills I was talking about. And I'm going to zoom through this because we got about 10 minutes. But Dynamex created the 10 physical skills. They're listed here. The ones in bold are the ones that we prioritize: endurance, stamina, strength, flexibility, which we call range of motion, and then balance and stability. I think those are all necessary for the chapter of training inside of the motherhood transition. There's a little bit more here about that. about the physical skills. And then general strength and conditioning. The general strength and conditioning style of our programming was created by myself, and then I brought Coach Leah Bartow in. Leah Bartow is an amazing athlete. She was in the CrossFit space for a while. Prior to that, she was an athlete, and you'll see her if you've done any of our programs. She's my demo queen, because she's just a beautiful mover. And there was one time I was at the gym in Los Angeles and Venice, and there was an actor there working, and we were kind of standing back watching people move in class. He was like, "Isn't movement beautiful?" And you can see, when somebody is a beautiful mover, they're just so eloquent and graceful in their movement, and they don't get injured. It's safe. It's beautiful. So yes, like I absolutely think movement is beautiful, and beautiful movers are, it's they found their innate flow, I guess. um you know there's a list right here of some of our big influences on programming. You can read that. So if you're curious, things like the conjugate method, kabuki strength, CrossFit, yoga. Believe it or not, I've taught strongman classes, and I've taught yoga classes, y'all. So I have such a array of teachings under my belt. Okay, so our BIRTHFIT programming is a harmonic blend of strength and conditioning, powerlifting, odd object lifting, which would be strongman-esque, gymnastics, strength, endurance, skill, range of motion, balance and stability, triphasic muscle contraction, triplanar, polyvagal theory, DNS, FRC, functional range conditioning, energy systems, recovery, rep ranges, and intuition. Okay, so here's what I want to share with you before we open the floor for some questions. This is a training day template, and this is based on the polyvagal theory, which we'll get into more of when we talk about nervous system. But the polyvagal theory talks about how our nervous system is set up, right? And we talked about neuroception, about how our nervous system picks up on outside cues to signal to our nervous system, are we safe or is there a threat? So the polyvagal theory views the nervous system as a phylogenetic hierarchy, meaning when we perceive a threat, we work through level 1, 2, and 3. So level 1 would be socialization. Level 2 would be fight or flight, sympathetics. Level 3 would be freeze, dissociate. And that's all I'm going to share for now. Our polyvagal theory sandwich, right, starts with the mind-body connection, a socialization. We want to show our bodies that we are safe in this training space. Like, okay, life was happening. I showed up for myself in the gym. I showed up for myself in the studio, garage gym, wherever. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to do some BIRTHFIT Basics. I'm feeling how my body's feeling today. I'm checking in. I'm having a conversation with my body. Then we get into strength training, fitness training, and this is the sympathetics. So sympathetics, people like to think of fight or flight as a bad thing, and I think that's a big misconception. Working out is huge growth and adaptation in a positive sense for the sympathetic branch, for that part of the nervous system. And then we finish the day with mind-body reflection. So now we're going back and down regulating our nervous system. As I mentioned before, we do have maybe one training day a week that is at moderate intensity for aerobic capacity to train the engine a little longer. Here's some more about the polyvagal theory. And, here's a little study right here if you want to just share with anybody about the benefits and why it's necessary. Good old-fashioned strength and conditioning training. And that's what BIRTHFIT is, good old-fashioned strength and conditioning training, because it's not out there. All right, so the BIRTHFIT Basics. Oh, oops, sorry, y'all. Like I said, they're on YouTube and they're free, or we have a program for each, the postpartum or prenatal. But these are fundamental movements. And I think not only every woman in pregnancy and postpartum needs to do these, but I've had VIPs of companies that have had back surgeries do these. I've had Olympic level athletes do these that were nowhere near their motherhood transition chapter. So you can use these in all types of population. Okay, functional movements. We got the squat. Here's some variations of squats. We got lunges with some variations, hinges, variations. By all means, these lists aren't exhaustive, but these are the foundational movements that we build our programs from. And then here's a sample day. So you'll get these sample days. This is taken directly from our first trimester program. This is week 9, day 1. So it has a mind-body connection piece, and those are all BIRTHFIT basic movements. Then we have some fitness there, the little chipper, and then a strength and a mind-body reflection piece. Here's a sample training day for second trimester, week 21. And you can see we start to incorporate a lot more, I would say, rest, intentional rest, because we don't know how long labor is going to be, right? But we do know how long contractions are. They're anywhere from 60 to 90 seconds with a peak intensity of 10 to 15 seconds. So rest could be anywhere, right? It starts longer, maybe 10 minutes, and then, it gets down to like 2 minutes or 90 seconds in between rest. So we can definitely train intentional along those lines. And then there's sample lying in, nurse in the sunshine, belly massage. We got a sample day postpartum. This is sample postpartum training, week 3, day 1. So you can see how these evolve. And then I want to touch on this. The really cool thing about our programs is all the information we discussed, that lens, that mindset goes into our programming. And each training day is around 30 to 45 minutes with minimal equipment. So if you had a set of dumbbells and a super band, you could do our programs. And this one, made by mothers for mothers. I think that's the best part. So if you've stayed and listened this long, you definitely get a discount if you want to try any of our programs. Use that code webinar20. It'll get you a 20% discount off any programs.